This is Paul Pescisolido, and you are listening to the Fulham Focus podcast.
Fulham.
Hello, welcome to the Fulham Focus podcast. My name's Matt Boisclair, and the Whites are back in action this Saturday afternoon as we face Crystal Palace at Craven Cottage. Dust your wallets off again, folks, as it's time to line the pockets of the television companies again. We'll be looking ahead to the game very shortly, plus Danny joins me for a player in focus chat about Whites legend Brede Hangeland. But before we go any further, and this is the point in the show when I'd usually take the piss out of my co-host for something they've either said or done recently, this week, I have to hold my hands up for quite possibly doing the most stupid thing of all of us myself. Regular listeners may have noticed that very recently, the sound on my microphone's gone from sounding like I'm in an echoey room to sounding on par with everyone else. That's because despite getting through 2 microphones and over 2 years of being on this show, effectively, as far as the settings on my computer go, my microphone's never actually been plugged in. As I said to the lads this week when I realised, I may as well have been sat here all this time speaking into a banana. So please accept my profound apologies for the terrible sound all this time. I'm quite literally the biggest plonker of all the Fulham Focus team. Morgs and Ben are with me this week. I've no grounds to say anything stupid about either of you this week. I'm just going to sit here in the corner thinking about what I've done, or more, what I haven't done.
He's such a prat. You really are. So sorry, listeners, you are going to hear him clearly now, and it's still not pretty.
Yeah, you're still going to hear the same old bollocks. It's just going to be in slightly higher quality.
Yeah. Oh, surround sound bollocks. Lovely.
Good stuff. All right, let's go then.
Fulham.
Well, we're up against a man the record book state as our most successful manager of all time, with accolades such as 7th place finish and a Europa League final amongst his incredible achievements whilst in charge at the Cottage. But current Crystal Palace manager Roy Hodgson, now at the age of 73, may have taken the Eagles as far as he can go. His side only scored 32 goals last season and became the first club never to score more than 2 in a game, not to be relegated from the Premier League. Crystal Palace fans were beginning to think a change in the manager might be needed in the summer after a 7-game losing streak post-lockdown saw them finish 14th. But the board have kept faith, at least for now. Morgs, talk to me about your affection for Roy, a man whose Palace side did the double over us when we were in the Premier League 2 years ago.
I think unless you're a Liverpool fan, there is no way you can dislike Roy Hodgson. Obviously, England, whatever. But the way he turned our club around in basically no time at all was nothing short of incredible. He came in with us languishing at the bottom of the table. We're playing, crap football. I mean, if you are sort of Palace fans, maybe it's not the best football now, but he managed to get us playing a style of football that was enough to A, keep us promoted, and B, advance the team when it looked like we were done for. And I think any manager who is able to do something that special in such a short space of time deserves plaudits before you even get to the Europa League run. And I think when you then look at the fact he got us to finish 7th in the league the next year after being so awful the first half of the season before that, it's not miracles or anything like that, but what he must have done, I can't even imagine what he was doing on the training pitch compared to what Sanchez was doing to make those players suddenly believe in themselves so much. And I think it's a mark of a man who can actually talk to footballers like this, who, a lot of them ride in their egos. They are confidence players, all that. Everyone's got a different character. And he just got them to gel so well. And we have had a lot of managers over the last few years, and he is definitely up there in the top 1 or 2, really, isn't it, when it comes to sort of player management by the sounds of it. And I think he is a special person, and I think he will always go down in Fulham folklore as one of our most special managers as well.
I was just about to say then, actually, to paraphrase Brian Clough I'm not the best manager of all time, but I'm in the top one. Roy Hodgson's our best ever, isn't he? Apart from Mickey Adams, who's in my heart for very different reasons to Roy Hodgson.
You look at all of them, like, Tigana obviously did what he did. Then obviously Slav and stuff like that. But this guy took us from relegation certainties to Europa League finalists in 2 years. And who does that? That's not normal.
Not to mention our highest position ever in the Premier League.
Well, that's the thing. Relegation certainties to Europa League finalists with the highest ever league finish sandwiched in between.
Not bad, is it? Not bad.
It's not. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could see why he got a big job after that, and it saddens me that it didn't work out. But obviously, that Liverpool job at the time was a bit of a poison chalice, I think. And obviously going on, and what he's done at Palace as well. All due respect, he's turned a team that should, be more relegation candidates into a solid Premier League team. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, well, obviously 3 years, you need to build that solidity in order to sort of maintain your Premier League status. And that's what we don't have. But he's come in. It's not good football that they play. And I'm sure we'll talk about this, but, it's a very get that 1-0 win kind of game. But it is business-like football. It's not, it's there to sort of make sure the clubs stay where they are. And but he's done it well.
Well, it was De Boer that was there before, wasn't it? And I don't think Palace had scored. They hadn't got any points. He got sacked. His only stint in English football management. And then Roy came in and did what he does best and turns around the fortunes of a club who are struggling at the wrong end of the table and comfortably kept them up. And he did it again at Palace. Ben, you're a little bit younger than Morgs and I. So we're going back 10 years ago. So what would you have been then, like 13, 14? What do you remember about Roy at Fulham? Yeah. What would you remember about Roy at Fulham?
Yeah. It's actually one of the first seasons I remember, the Great Escape season. Before that, I remember bits and bobs about Lewis Boamorti. That's all I remember from before that. But
you're so young.
I remember being sat that Great Escape season, and we were down. And then Roy Hodgson came in, turned it around, like Morgan said. And I remember being in Man City, in the away end at Man City, when we were 2-0 down and came back to win it. And so the hope sort of came back then. And the way the players were playing there, you could see they were playing together. And I think that's what he does. He comes in, he gets results. It's not pretty. They don't score a lot. They don't come in and win you over with their football. I think that's what went on from Liverpool. Because he came in, Liverpool want to win by 4 or 5 goals every game and play good football. And you're not going to get that from Hodgson. He's going to come in, do a job, get a 1-0, 2-0 result and go home. Last season, not scoring more than 2 in a game with Ayew and Zaha up top, it kind of sums it up, if nothing else.
Yeah, but he had Benteke as well, didn't he? So that's always going to sort of knock you down a goal.
Yeah.
Oh, don't start slagging players off. You know what'll happen if you do that.
If he was injured, then I'll slag them off. That's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Ayew's got coronavirus, so we wish him all the best and hope he gets well soon. But slag him off all you want, because he won't be scoring. He won't be scoring. Ben, I'm curious because Morgan and I are a little bit older, and we've seen a few more managers and good times than I guess you have because of the era in which we grew up in. But who's your favourite Fulham manager from what you've seen?
Probably Slav, to be fair.
Okay.
For me, because like I said, the earliest I can remember, I remember Chris Coleman vaguely, but I don't really remember what the football was like. Laurie Sanchez, that's about the earliest I remember.
Oh my God.
So.
Sorry, mate. When I asked the question, who's your favourite manager of all time? Laurie Sanchez is not part of that answer.
Was that your first memory? That's like your first memory being seeing your parents shagging. I mean, that's like.
What do you mean your first memory of that?
That being your first memory is like when you always ask kids, like, what was your first memory? Yeah. Oh, Laurie Sanchez.
No wonder they packed you off the boarding school, mate. Anyway, let's move on. Palace won their opening 2 games this season. Firstly, a home victory over Southampton, and then an impressive 3-1 win at Old Trafford both games in which Wilfried Zaha was instrumental for them, scoring 3 goals in those 2 games. Since then, they've had a couple of defeats and a draw. But, Ben, how much of a danger will Zaha be against us on Saturday?
Well, I think Zaha is the best player in the bottom half of the Premier League. If you look at the teams around there, he should be playing for a better team than Palace. No offence to Palace, but he should be playing for a team that's sort of top 7, top 8, something like an Everton or a Wolves. I'm amazed he hasn't gone yet. But yeah, he is instrumental to their attack. Everything goes through him quite a lot of the time down that wing. He's fast on the counter-attack. And I think when we played Palace, when we came up 2 seasons ago, that home game, the one thing he made me realise was that we don't have a player like that. A player he's got that speed, he can get forward and he can bomb in and score goals. And we don't really have that. We do now through Lookman and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. That's his name. I forgot his name for a second there. But we didn't have that 2 years ago. Andre Schürrle was at the end of his career. And I do think he's going to, with Ayew out as well, he's going to be the main danger man going forward. We have to keep a good eye on him.
Yeah, and I think you look at Zaha, and he does have that kind of the aura of a player who should definitely be playing higher up the leagues. And obviously, he had a stint with United back in whenever it was. I guess it must have been 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Now it was under Morgs, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's longer than you think.
Yeah, but he's not young anymore. I mean, I think there were rumours of him leaving to go to, I think, maybe Everton or Arsenal or something like that over the summer. But I don't know if he's got the right attitude for a lot of teams. And he is very well suited to Palace because he knows the club. The fans love him. It massages his ego enough, I think. And I'm not sort of, taking away from the fact how talented he is, but he does blow hot and cold. And I think, maybe that's why he didn't make it at United, because obviously it was a big, they don't take, they don't suffer fools up there. And when he was playing with that particular ego without justifying it, it didn't work out for him. So coming back to Palace, worked very well. And I think if he were to leave, would you see the same player? Maybe not. I don't know. But he will cause us problems because he is a confidence player and he knows that our defence has not been good. And I think you might see him trying a few tricks. This may end up seeing him put into the stands at some point. But he is, he's a player that will cause us problems. And obviously, when we played them last time at the Cottage, he did score. And I think we've got to be very wary that he will do that again.
Well, we've spoken about defence there. Let's talk about the Fulham attack. Alexander Mitrovic had an afternoon to forget at Bramall Lane last Sunday, but he'll have a point to prove now, don't you think? He'll be fired up for this one, won't he, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it can't get much worse for him, can it? Missing a penalty, giving away a penalty. It was an all-round terrible afternoon. He couldn't seem to get started. And my dad said when we were watching the game, when balls get fired into him, normally he holds them up. He can take one touch, bring it down. And he just didn't seem to be able to do it. He just didn't seem to be able to get started at all. And he just seemed a bit off the pace. And someone said he played 3 games for Serbia, was it, in the week before?
Yeah, something like that. He'd definitely been on an international tour.
Yeah, that doesn't help. Everything that's going on as well. I think, was it the best time to do that? But it's going to be a physical battle.
He's still got in those positions though, where he'd normally get to score. It's just he was misfiring, really, wasn't he?
Yeah. And is that because he's a bit tired, or is it just because it's a bad day at the office?
I think you look at talking about Zaha. He is a bit of a confidence player, like all strikers are, really. I mean, you miss one, and then you are slightly sort of you're aware rather than doing something instinctively. You are trying to do something when you think about it, and I think there is a few things there where he would have just put the ball in the back of the net if he'd been on a good day, but he probably was concerned that he would miss, so he thought about it for a split second. You could tell when he took the penalty. He changed his mind at the last second. And obviously maybe it had been because Ramsdale had dived already and he was going to go that way. Or maybe he just decided to try and be a bit clever. But either way, as I said, nothing was working out that day. And it was just, I think you won't see too many games like that for him He might have a bad game, but he won't have a bad game where he misses that many chances in one go. And hopefully he can rectify it, because he's going to be fired up. If he's any kind of footballer that and we know that he will want to make up for those mistakes.
Well, everyone's entitled to have a bad day at the office. And as Scott Parker said in his post-match interview at Bramall Lane on Sunday, if anyone's earned the right to have a bad day, then it's Mitrovic, because he's bailed us out of so mmany situations, whether, it was with his goals in the Premier League the last time around, or either promotion season when his goals basically got us promoted both times, by all intents and purposes. So, yeah, I'm going to stick my neck out here. We'll do the prediction later on, but I think he'll score, and I think he might get more than one as well this weekend. I think he'll be properly fired up to right that wrong from last weekend.
So I'm wondering at the moment, because I made the mistake of making my fancy team captain last week, thinking that he might sort of pop up with a goal or something. And despite the fact you get double points for being a captain, he got 0 points. So I don't know whether to do the decent thing and take him off the captaincy in order to sort of release the shackles of being my captain. But I think I might just keep it there just in case he does come good.
See triple captain this week, Morgan.
He'll get sent off after scoring 2 own goals if I do that.
3 times 0 is still 0, isn't it?
You get minus points.
He's going to bang him in this week. I want to ask you both really quickly about the squad that's been submitted to the Premier League. It's up until the January transfer window, isn't it? So we've seen no place in the squad for Jean-Michel Seri, which I guess we kind of saw coming. Same with Kevin McDonald and Stefan Johansson, although I do feel sorry for the pair of those two that we couldn't find them another club to go to if they weren't going to be considered. But the real surprise was Josh Onomah, wasn't it? The fact that he's not included in the squad. Maybe he's injured, maybe he's not. Don't really know what's going on. But I just wanted to get your thoughts. And I'll come to you first, Ben. Your thoughts on the squad of 25 that we submitted.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a couple of surprises in there. In fact, we've got 6 centre-halves, is it, in that squad? Is it 6? Yeah.
I think it's 11 defenders in total, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it just seems like quantity over quality at this point.
It's kind of what we have, though, isn't it?
11 defenders on the pitch. What's the worst that can happen? But I'm surprised Onomah's not in it. But if he's got an injury for a couple of months and Scott Parker's thinking he's not quite ready yet, regardless, it might be worth just waiting until January, because you can knock him back in January into the squad. Seri, like you said, no surprise, but we should get him off the books. He's on 65k a week or whatever. He's a bit of a waste. Could be better spent elsewhere. Tony Khan can get some dodgy foreign signing in. Waste all that on someone gets injured in the first training session like Anderson. But yeah, the others were fairly standard, weren't they? The K-Mac, Johansson.
Oh, it's sad though, isn't it? It is that end of an era, and totally understand why K-Mac's not in it. He's not going to get a game. He's too slow for the Premier League. The last season he was too slow for the Championship, and it's a shame because he was such a great player in that year that we went up in 2018 and the season before, and it just obviously post Vegas never quite came good, and he just he should be at the club as a coach, but he's only 31, so he's still, in theory, got a bit of a playing career left in him, and I guess he's got to decide for himself whether he's still up to playing in whatever league he may be, get a chance in. He might go to MLS, he might go to Scotland or something like that. But I think he, I'd like to see him stay there or at least come back because he's such a motivator. Whereas Steph Joe, I mean, that's a it's interesting that he didn't get in. He's a good player, and he won't start every week. He could come on and do something for us, but I guess we have such an abundance of midfielders again now that there was just no place. And I do hope that he gets a move, because at the end of the day, he's Norway captain, isn't he, a lot of the time? And so I think he deserves deserves opportunity to go and play football. And Jean-Michel Seri, I just couldn't care less, to be honest. Never going to do it.
I kind of feel a little bit disappointed in the club in the way that they've treated, particularly Stefan Johansson. Because last time we were in the Premier League, he didn't really get a shout. and then he was shipped out on loan to West Brom. Then we brought him back in, and he was almost a bit part player last season as well in the Championship, wasn't he? We've kind of hung on to him, and then this year he's not going to get a game until at least January when he might find a new club. It's a bit of a shame for somebody who's been a great servant to the club over the years.
What I think you might find is that we release both of them, because obviously clubs can still sign free transfers, and I think it would be the right thing to, if they find a club to say, we'll release you from your contract, don't release them without paying them, but release, give them the opportunity to play somewhere before, don't make them take 6 months off. It's or however many months we've got till Christmas, January. They deserve the chance to go and play. And I think, there are opportunities still out there. And I think there are some windows that are still open, but I'm not 100% on that.
Good stuff. All right, lads. Well, let's go across now to a chat that I had with Danny about ex-Fulham captain and Fulham royalty, if you like, Brede Hangeland.
Fulham.
Right, well, it's not quite been the start to the season we were hoping for, but I'm here with Danny to talk about some great times of days gone by. This week, it's Fulham royalty as we look back over Brede Hangeland's time at the club. How's things, Danny?
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. All set for this?
Yeah, looking forward to this one. Absolute legend, Brede, isn't he? So, yeah, really good. Let's go for it.
Well, he was born in Houston, Texas. The 6'6" Norwegian central defender Brede Hangeland signed for Fulham in January 2008 from Copenhagen, reuniting with Roy Hodgson, for whom he played at Viking in Norway. Roy Hodgson, of course, had recently replaced the sacked Lawrie Sanchez after a disastrous start to his only opportunity in Premier League management to date. It was a time of transition, but something had to happen quickly if we were to escape relegation. Had you ever even heard of Hangeland when he signed? Because I know I hadn't.
No, I hadn't. And if I'm being honest with you, I didn't really care to find out anything about him. I was still coming to terms with the fact that Roy Hodgson had been appointed to be our saviour. I was very underwhelmed by Hodgson's appointment at the time, and he came in at the back end of December, and obviously these players were signed in January, so I didn't really care for the players he was bringing in. I thought we were doomed, and it wasn't until the February that we got our first win. So I guess my opinion of Hangeland and all those signings he made just had a knock-on effect from my view of Hodgson's appointment, sadly. We had a tendency to go for random players from all over the world, low profile, low budget signings that hopefully would turn out to be a bit of a bargain, but most likely would just be a waste of time. And I kind of felt Hangeland was going to be one of those gambles. And how wrong was I?
Well, Roy Hodgson's stock in this country wasn't particularly high. He'd been with Blackburn a long time ago, hadn't he? And then he just kind of knocked around managing some international teams and teams outside of England. Although he did manage Inter Milan, but just it was quite a depressing time to be a Fulham fan in a way, because Chris Coleman had taken the club as far as he could go and never really got to spend much money, if we're honest. Then Lawrie Sanchez came in, billed himself as the saviour for getting that one lucky win against Liverpool, which kept us up the previous season. But was then given a bit of money to spend. You know, he signed Stephen Davis, and I think Diamanti Cameras cost about £6 million. It didn't work out for Sanchez. But Roy Hodgson came in, and like you say, it was quite underwhelming. And we thought, is this guy really going to get us out of this? When was the last time he managed in the Premier League? And yeah, bringing in players from Scandinavia, I think Leon Andreasen was another one, Hangeland. You just thought, never heard of these players. If it works, then great. But chances are it's not going to. But those signings, along with the return of the likes of Jimmy Bullard and Brian McBride from long-term injuries, had a big bearing on our latter season form, which resulted in that last day survival win at Fratton Park, Portsmouth. I doubt it would have happened without the signing of the big man, Brede Hangeland, though, would it? He transformed us from looking terrible at the back to good, and then eventually solid pretty quickly.
Well, I remember his debut against Bolton away, and we drew 0-0, and we could have won that game. But straight away, you could see there was more solidity at the back. There was a foundation that made us hard to beat, and that pretty much was Hodgson all over. So, you know, although we wasn't excited by Hodgson's appointment, he clearly knew what he was doing, and the players that he brought in, if anything, gave us a spine to the team. So Sanchez was playing people like Tony Warner in goal, and long balls up to David Healy up front because McBride was injured. People like Smertin and Stephen Davis in the middle were pointless if you was just going to play the long ball. And we went from that to having the likes of Casey Keller come in, very experienced, McBride and Bullard come back, Bullard alongside Murphy. And, of course, the icing on the cake for me was Hangeland and his partnership with Aaron Hughes, which just got off to a really good start. There was just such a natural pairing. I would imagine Hangeland also spoke English, which must have really helped the communication at the back and how they started so well. Like you say, without Hangeland, we wouldn't have stayed up because we would have just lost every game. We would have just conceded goals for fun, as we're experiencing so far this season.
Well, you mentioned the Hangeland and Hughes partnership there, and it did become a brilliant partnership in the heart of the Fulham defence for a few seasons. But I feel like Hangeland would have got the best out of many average Premier League central defenders. Do you think that's fair, or is that a bit harsh on Aaron Hughes' contribution to that partnership?
I think that's very harsh. To an extent, I agree, because Hangeland was a bit like Bobby Zamora. We touched on this with Zamora a couple of weeks ago, that they were so good that they would have brought up anyone's level. And I do think Hangeland got the best out of Aaron Hughes, but then I don't think Hangeland is the same player without Hughes next to him. Aaron Hughes started his career at Newcastle when Newcastle under Bobby Robson were in the top four all the time and playing in the Champions League. I think he had more about him than just being average. Hangeland was the much better player of the two. But I think what made them so good was that they were a perfect partnership.
I meant it more as a compliment to Hangeland more than a diss to Aaron Hughes, because Aaron Hughes was great, obviously, and if Aaron Hughes happened to hear me say that, he'd probably think, oh, what an idiot, what do these fans know? And I don't really mean it like that. I just mean that Brede Hangeland was that good that I think if you put in, I don't know, I can't think of an example of another or an average Premier League defender, but if you put somebody alongside him, I think that their game would have been raised playing alongside Brede Hangeland.
I 100% agree with that.
You look at our defence as it is now, as it has been this season and as it was in the Premier League last time, and you just appreciate how good players like Hangeland and Hughes were, because we've been disastrous at the back, and I guess we kind of probably took that for granted a little bit at the time that we had such good players at that time. Let's move on. In the August after the Great Escape, we recorded a fantastic 1-0 win over Arsenal at the Cottage as Brede Hangeland got his first goal for the club. It was a classic centre-half goal, wasn't it? Prodded in with his studs from close range.
Yeah, no one was going to get to the ball before him, were they? He just absolutely bulldozed his way through and smashed it in with his studs. He didn't score many goals, did he, Hangeland? But it came off the back of losing to newly promoted Hull away.
Yeah.
We just recovered from the Great Escape and we went up to Hull with all these new signings, and I thought, new start, fresh start. And we lost to them, and I thought, here we go again. And obviously, what a way to respond. It's beating Arsenal at home. So it was, a nice way to score your first goal for the club.
Yeah, and you said that he doesn't score that many goals, but Shakhtar Donetsk away. Talk me through your memories of that.
Well, Shakhtar away, I mean, it was probably more nerve-wracking than the first leg, and I thought that was bad enough. I've said it before, I'll say it again, Shakhtar are the best team I've ever seen. The football they played was unbelievable. And I think that's a testament to people like Hangeland and the way Hodgson played, that we somehow could overcome that. And a team as good as Shakhtar Donetsk couldn't break us down. And Hangeland, of course, scoring that header away in Ukraine was the difference between the two teams. So, yeah, not probably. It was the most important goal he ever scored for Fulham. And the rest is history.
I just remember going into that second leg in the Ukraine thinking we're just going to be turning up and we're probably going to get smashed after... but we took a lead out there, didn't we, from the first leg after that Zamora goal when we won 2-1, and we ended up drawing 1-1 away. Didn't Danny Murphy get sent off in that game as well, the second leg, right at the end? Quite a petulant kick out.
Yeah, he did, yeah. And we beat Juventus over 2 legs without him because he got a 2-game ban.
Yeah. I remember getting on the internet as soon as we won, because I didn't go to Shakhtar, and just looking up flights to Turin, just booked my flights that night. And then it came to light that we weren't going to get that many tickets for the away game. Ended up driving up, took the morning off work, driving up and queuing up outside the ticket office to get a ticket to go to Turin for the first leg at Juventus. And yeah, just fantastic times. I don't think we'll ever see the like of that again. It was just amazing times.
Do you know what? That Juventus, the away game, I was there as well. And I didn't really do much research in the build-up to the game. And I was really looking forward to going to see this fantastic Juventus stadium. And it turned out they were ground sharing with Torino.
Yeah, it was ground smaller than ours. Tiny ground, isn't it?
It was rubbish, wasn't it? I think that was the only underwhelming thing about the whole Juventus experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a boozy trip for me and for a lot of other people, I think. The problem was my plane landed about 9 o'clock in the morning in Turin. Just got a really early flight, and the game didn't kick off till 9 o'clock at night their time. And I didn't really have any interest in seeing the sights out there. So I did what you tend to do on away trips and just meet up with your mates and head straight to the pub. And my God, it was a long day. Really long day.
Very cultured is our Matt Boss.
I know, yeah. I mean, I'm not particularly proud of it, but it happened. And I mean, it was a great trip, don't get me wrong. But yeah, good times. I remember another great goal Brede Hangeland scored as we came back from the dead against Manchester United to draw 2-2 in August 2010. Last-minute header from the big man to equalise, I think past Edwin van der Sar. He previously scored an own goal in that game to give United a 2-1 lead. And David Stockdale has saved a late penalty from Nani a few minutes earlier as well. What do you remember about that game? Do you remember that goal?
Yeah, I remember the game, I remember the goal, but you've basically just described everything that happened. I was going to mention Stockdale. It's probably the highlight of his career, wasn't it? Saving that Nani penalty. And then obviously Hangeland made amends for the own goal. Yeah, Hangeland was such a lovely guy and such a likeable person that you didn't like to see him let the team down. And it's nice that he made amends for it. And we didn't get many points at home to Man United. We had a little spell where we did well against them, but overall, our return was probably quite poor. And that was another priceless point.
I've got quite a funny story about that goal. I took a bloke who I worked with to that game. He didn't sit next to me, but he sat in the row in front, a few seats along. I got him as close as he could, but he was a Manchester United fan. I know, tut, naughty, but he's one of those guys who just keep his mouth shut, so it was fine. And when we equalised at the end, he's kind of stood up and, tried to blend in and clapped. And the bloke next to him, a Fulham fan, no idea who it was, but grabbed him, was jumping all over him, made him give him a high five and everything. It was absolutely, this guy that I work with is hilarious. I always remember that. What did you make when Brede Hangeland became Fulham captain? What did you make of him as a captain?
I love you, Brede, but you was not a captain. I always feel that you're going down the wrong road when you make the best player in the team the captain just because he's the best player in the team. I suppose on seniority and I suppose importance to the team, he probably was at the very top because Danny Murphy had left. But it just didn't work out. I remember him getting sent off for a tackle against Sunderland at the Cottage, and he got a straight red. And then there were stories after the game that he went and apologised to the referee. And I know we're Fulham and we love the fact that everyone loves us and we're such a friendly family club and do everything the right way. You don't want your captain apologising for a tackle that he was entitled to go for. It's not like he was abusive to the referee or something. It was just a foul. I think that was the only thing you could maybe criticise him for. And in a way, it's a nice thing to criticise him over. He was too nice to be a captain. And I think that's all it comes down to. Just wasn't an attribute that suited his game. But it hasn't made me feel any less about him as a player. For me, he's the greatest defender in Fulham's history. And I don't think you can get a bigger compliment than that.
Fair enough, mate. Fair enough. Have you got any other stories about him that you want to share?
Well, I've got one personal one that I know means a lot to my mum. my granddad obviously started off our Fulham family tradition, and towards the end of his life, his last few years, he was housebound, and because he wasn't on social media and things like that, I really was his only. I suppose I was his eyes and ears for Fulham, and he kind of felt a bit disconnected from it in a way. And I remember my mum and dad going to an evening at the cottage where I think Hangeland and Hughes were like special guests, just meeting and greeting the fans. And my mum mentioned about my granddad, and Brede said, "Get him on the phone. I'll have a chat with him." So my mum did. She rang him, and they were talking for a good 5 minutes about what they needed to improve on, and and the situation is just made my granddad feel like important, and he didn't have to do that, and I don't think many players would have, but just shows you how much he got what Fulham was about. And I'm getting a bit emotional now thinking about it, because it just meant so much. And for me, of all the players that I've ever seen play for Fulham, I don't know if this is a thing for small clubs or whether it's just a big club thing, but I can't think of a player more suited to be an ambassador for Fulham around the world. I just think he was just the perfect Fulham player. And yeah, he just means more to me than just a player. He's a very special person, and I have the utmost respect for him.
That's a brilliant story. I don't think you've ever told me that before. I love that. I can't believe that a Premier League footballer would say, "Yeah, just get him on the phone. I'll have a chat with him." How nice! What a top man. And you talk about respect. His final season at Fulham resulted in relegation from the Premier League after, which was a dreadful season, although he was not particularly responsible. New ownership, 3 managers, the last of which is probably the biggest disaster of a manager that the club has ever had, peaking when he told Brede to go and rub some cheese on an injury and call his mum to make it go away. What an utter idiot. Brede was then rewarded for some very special years at the club, and like I said, you talk about respect, that call to your granddad. He was released by email. Could a club legend be treated with any less respect than that?
Well, I mean, what a disgrace. I can't think of anything more untypical Fulham. It's just not the way we do things. And we've spoken in the past about people like Moritz Volts just disappearing through the back door and people forgetting they was even at the club. But for someone like Brede Hangeland, who is, for me, the greatest player of our greatest era, to be released by an email is a disgrace. And whoever did it should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, completely agree. After he signed for Crystal Palace, this weekend's opponents, he came back and sat at the Hammersmith end a few times to watch us as a fan, proving that he was Fulham forever. And it just goes to show that, that he didn't bear any grudges towards the fans for what happened when he was released by email. And I think he'll always be one of us. And like you said, he's one of our greatest players of all time, and probably is our greatest defender of all time. But for you, where does he sit on the list of club legends as a whole?
I'm pretty sure he made more Premier League appearances for us than any other player. And if you take out Simon Morgan, nobody since then has made more appearances for the club than Hangeland. So that shows you in the modern era, he was a very loyal player. And to be a player of that calibre, we're not talking about someone who was just Fulham's level and just plodded along with Fulham for years and years. He could have easily gone somewhere else. And I don't know how close moves were to bigger clubs or if there was any interest, but he never kicked up a fuss about moving, did he? He was very happy to be at Fulham. And I think that added to what makes him such a great player is that Fulham meant as much to him as he does to us, which isn't always the case with players that we adore. I think he's got to be the greatest defender of all time in the club's history. I know people will say people like Bobby Moore were better players in their own right, but in a Fulham shirt, Hangeland was playing at the top level. He played in the greatest era. And if you look at where Fulham were when he signed to where Fulham were a few months later, he was a big reason why we had the greatest era of our history. It wasn't just like circumstantial where he found himself in a good team. He made us a good team. In terms of all round who was our greatest player, I mean, you've got an elite group like Johnny Haynes, George Cohen, Graham Leggett, Bedford Jezard, Adam Mullery, Gordon Davis. I would say those 6 are probably the elite, and it's going to be very hard for someone to ever break into that. But after that, I think 7th place is up for grabs. I think there's a lot of players that have done well for Fulham over the years. And when you think about the level Hangeland was playing at and the era we had, I don't see a reason why he couldn't be 7th. So for me, he would be in the top 10, which speaks volumes of how much I think of him as a player.
Superb, mate. Well, rate his career out of 10 at Fulham then.
1. No, if I could give him more than a 10, I would. 10 out of 10. Other than not being the greatest captain in the world, it was faultless for me. I don't blame him for our demise. I actually think the fact that he had injury problems and that he wasn't the same player towards the end is probably one of the reasons why we ended up going down, because he was irreplaceable. And without a spine that included the likes of Hangeland, Hughes, Murphy, Zamora and Schwarzer, we just went soft again. He was irreplaceable. What can you say? 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I echo that exactly. I couldn't give him anything but a 10 as well. You look at, as I said, how we defend these days, and it's just completely different to how we used to defend and how we used to be when we had a player of his quality at our disposal. So, you know, those sort of players come along once or twice in a lifetime, and, you know, those of us who saw him play were very lucky to have done so. And I feel privileged to have watched him. So, yeah, 10 out of 10 for me as well. Brilliant stuff. All right, mate, I enjoyed that one. Thanks for that.
Fulham.
Right, so let's come on to some stats then. As per usual, Stato Matt Arthur has prepared a lovely Fulham-focused fact file on the visitors Crystal Palace. Morgs, what have you got for us?
I have got to start with our record against Palace. So we have played 45 games. We have won 17, we've drawn 15, and we've only lost 13. Obviously, this was the first fixture of our 2018-19 campaign. Everyone full of optimism, flags waving, ground full, and Uncle Roy gave us a good beating. And it was a solid 2-0 loss to Palace. It was also the full league debuts for Fabry, Maxime Le Marchand, Callum Chambers, Joe Bryan, Jean-Michel Seri, and Andre Schürrle that day. Memorable. That 11 that Palace played were all there the season before, and they say that consistency is important, so maybe that's why we lost. The last time we won at home to Palace was back in January 2005. We won 3-1 and goals from Andrew Cole, who got 2, and Thomas Radzinski. Andrew Johnson scored the goal for Palace that day, and Garbal Karali was in goal for Palace during the game as well, which explains why we scored at least 3. Overall, our last 5 games against Palace have been pretty balanced. We've lost 2, won 2, and we've got a draw. The other win was our wonderful 4-1 win away when Kasami scored that amazing goal and Philip Senderos scored a bicycle kick, which was one for the collector's edition.
Best goal ever, that Kasami goal. Best Fulham goal ever. Bobby, hasn't it? Apart from Mickey Conroy from the halfway line against Wickham.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be up there. I mean, obviously, Senderos's one was pushing it.
And Steve Sidwell scored a belter that day as well.
Yeah,
Sidwell scored one from the
there were 3 belters in that one. And that Kasami goal was just something special. I mean, you could try and do that all the time. He probably wouldn't score it again. But yeah, that was definitely up there in the top 2. Let's call it that. One of Fulham or Palace have been in the Premier League for 24 out of the previous 28 Premier League seasons, but have only faced each other in the Premiership in 3 of those seasons. When we're in it, they're not, and vice versa. We've had 23 home games against Palace, only lost 4 of them before the loss in 2018. Our last home loss to Palace came back in March 1986 in the old Division 2, when Ben wasn't even thought of. I could have used a really unpleasant analogy, but I won't.
Probably for the best.
Yeah. I've had a couple of drinks. It could go anywhere. Right. So looking at the Crystal Palace story from last season to this season, in 2018-19, it was a classic Roy Hodgson season that saw them finish at a steady 12th, and it looked as if the trend was going to continue into 2019-20. Much of the summer surrounded the talismanic striker Wilfried Zaha. In the end, he stayed put, despite lots of transfer speculation to the contrary. But they certainly affected his season, as he only scored 4 goals throughout it. Obviously, with finances being tight at Palace, they could only sign Jordan Ayew for $2.5 million, James McCarthy for a small undisclosed fee, and Gary Cahill came in as an experienced free agent. Nonetheless, in a typical Hodgson fashion, they managed to get a modest start. They only lost 3 of their opening 10 games. They amassed 15 points during that time. And whilst survival was the main objective, and they were right on course to this through the halfway stage, they had 26 points after 19 games and were looking set for another season in the Premier League. And, as they moved forward, by game week 30, they'd moved up to 9th place on 42 points. And obviously, by this point, survival is basically virtually guaranteed. But as you see with a lot of teams of that stature, if they know they've got over 40 points, sometimes they get a bit comfortable. It looks as if they've gone on their holidays, because after that they went to lose 7 of their 8 final games. Obviously, lockdown affected a lot of teams like that. They only drew on the final day to stop the rot and eventually finished in 14th place. Fans and pundits were expecting Palace to continue this rot start this season, but they bounced back by winning their first 2 games of the season, including a very impressive 3-1 win at Old Trafford against Man U. However, they have not won since then, losing 2, and they drew against Brighton on Sunday, which is a game I watched, and I have to say it was turgid at best. Looked at it, and the thing that stood out from that game is that once they score, they will sit back, and it is very difficult to break them down. And I think we need to get the first goal in that game in order to make sure that we don't have to suddenly play up against a wall of Hodgson-esque defending.
So I've got the Crystal Palace stats at a glance for 1920. They had 11 wins last season. 6 of those came at home and 5 in away games. And the home and away form were fairly similar. They had 5 draws home, 5 draws away, 8 losses at home and 9 losses away. So fairly consistent whether at home or away. But the big difference comes in the goals conceded. In the home games, they only conceded an average 1.05 goals a game, but in away games, this went up to 1.58. And their goals scored is horrendously low, with only 0.84 goals scored per away game, which is better than the home record of only 0.79 goals per game, which is pretty impressive, the fact they stayed up, scoring less goals than they conceded. They only won by more than 1 goal margin on 3 occasions, and they didn't manage to score more than 2 goals or win by more than 2 goals at all last season. 60% of the goals they conceded in the away games came in the second half, the majority of them coming in the last 15 minutes. New signs for Crystal Palace. You got Ebereki Eze, who you will remember from QPR. We played him a few times in the Championship. He's a former Fulham youth player, actually. He joined from QPR in the summer for 16 million. Last season in the Championship, he got 14 goals and 8 assists. It's not a bad return. And he's only started 2 games so far this season. He's yet to score assists in the Premier League. Only Say Banrama and Ovi Ejaria registered more successful dribbles than him in the last season in the Championship. Signed Nathan Ferguson, fullback signed the free agent after his contract expired at West Brom. He made 21 appearances at West Brom last season, scoring 1 and assisting 1, but he's yet to make appearances this season. So another player that Palace have signed this season is Michy Batshuayi. He joined on loan from Chelsea for a second spell at Crystal Palace. His first spell coming in 18-19. He was only used as a sub last year at Chelsea, and he started 1 game in the league all season. He's been on loan several times, like most Chelsea players, and he's been successful most times he's been away. He went to Dortmund in 17-18 and scored 7 goals in 10 games, and he was at Palace for the second half of the 18-19 season and scored 5 in 11 games. But he's yet to score this season for Palace. They've also signed Jack Butland and Nathaniel Klein. They signed Butland from Stoke for just $500k, but they expected to be using him as just cover this season. And they're saying Klein from Liverpool was a free agent after he was released.
Lovely stuff, mate. Thanks for that. Well, we've already spoken a bit about some of their key players, or one in particular, Wilfried Zaha, who's scored 40 goals since he rejoined Crystal Palace back in 2014. And we've already said he's got 4 goals this season in just 5 games. He had a quiet season last year, however, scoring just 4 and assisting 3. And the transfer speculation at the start of the season where he almost moved to Everton really probably affected his form. His goals mainly come from inside the penalty box and more often than not come as a result of successful dribbles that he makes. He'll probably be playing in that central striker role, but he'll probably also drift out wide if one of Benteke or Batshuayi starts. We're going to talk a bit about the Crystal Palace defence now, in particular Mamadou Sakho. Plenty of their experienced centre-backs we could have spoken about here. We've got Gary Cahill, Scott Dan, Martin Kelly. But Sakho has been picked due to the fact that he's the only one who's started all of Crystal Palace's 4 games this season. So he'll be the main man if we're going to break Crystal Palace down. It's a robust Roy Hodgson defence, but one that's also showing signs of ageing, as the average age of Palace's defence at the moment is 29. That average figure is only brought down by the average age of young fullbacks Ferguson and Tyrant Mitchell, who's come up through the Crystal Palace youth team. They've conceded 8 goals so far, with 3 of those being penalties and 4 coming from open play. Seen impressive performances so far from their goalkeeper Vicente Guaita, who is currently in 5th place on total saves made by Premier League keepers this season. Although, as Ben said, they've now signed Jack Butland, who will be providing stiff competition. So we'll wait and see as to whether or not he breaks into the team or not.
I think you probably won't see Butland for a while. I think he was brought in very much as cover, because I think if you look at here how he performed at Stoke over the last couple of seasons, I think they were just trying to get him off their books, because he'd even dropped to the bench there. So I think Guaita, he's been pretty solid for them, and I don't think he'll be getting displaced anytime soon. And I think, like any Hodgson team, the 2 centre backs and the goalkeeper, 3 of the most important players that you'll see. So I don't think he's going to be changing up too much there.
How the mighty have fallen. I remember when he was one of the hottest young prospects, but
Yeah.
we've got quite a lot of goalkeepers in this country at the moment who are obviously way ahead of him in line for the number 1 spot in the England team. But he has been given the number 1 shirt at Crystal Palace. It was probably just free, to be honest, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's the
It was either that or 54.
Yeah, exactly. All right, lads. Well, as I said earlier in the show, we know that Jordan Ayew was Crystal Palace's top scorer last season with 9 goals, but he's self-isolating after testing positive for coronavirus, so won't be available for selection. But Morgs, how do you see Fulham lining up? We've got to attack him from the start, surely. You've already said that we've got to get the first goal here.
I don't think we'll see much change from last week. I think at times, obviously, there was frustration how we played in the first half, but we did play some decent stuff. And I think the only change that I could safely say would be Cavallero coming off. I don't know who for, but of all the players that played, I think he's the only one that I would actually replace. I think, as the article that Luke released yesterday about Kearney's new position, I think we're going to see a lot more of him there. And obviously without Steph Joe came back as options, I think him with Anguissa and Loftus-Cheek playing in that midfield 3, I think that's going to be a bit of a mainstay if they can all keep fit and continue their form. Because I think.
What about Lamina though? Lamina looked good when he came on at the weekend, although only for the last kind of 10 minutes or so.
I don't think he's ready to start yet. I don't know what the if he had a bit of an injury, didn't he? But I think Anguissa obviously has to start, because we've just seen how different class he is to that guy that signed from Marseille, back in 2018-19. And you've got to look at Kearney, who's, we've talked about this endless times. He's not the best captain out there, but he does provide a certain experience of playing for Fulham that a lot of the players don't have. And so I think doing that job in deep in midfield, I think hopefully it can work for him. So those 2, and then we bring Lamina on at some point during the game. If maybe.
Fair enough. What about you, Ben? How do you see it going?
I can see exactly the same team. Like Morgan said, maybe Cavallero out, but then who'd you bring in? We haven't exactly got a...
Well, that's the thing.
It's AK, isn't it?
Who's it? I mean,
AK-40.
it's... Oh,
Kamara.
God. Oh, just leave it blank.
Yeah, which one's the lesser of two evils, I suppose? Kamara who misses the easy chances, or Cavallero who can't create them?
I guess you've also got Bobby Reid there as well, potentially.
Yeah, you don't want to say that name too much in our group chat.
No, I know. Okay, so if it was you then, if it was you picking the team, would you play Cavallero on the right, or what would you do?
I would, but only because he's got a bit of Prem experience, and we haven't got another option. I think that's the only place now in our squad you can look at and say maybe we haven't got enough sort of Prem experience there, or a good enough player there is probably right back now. Right wing, not right back.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, we go from game to game, don't we? And we think, well, that looked all right. And at Wolves, we thought, well, that kind of Brian and Robinson kind of combination on the left looked good. But then Lookman comes in and starts from the beginning against Sheffield United and looks fantastic. I think Scott Parker has a different tactical solution in his head for each game. I don't think it's a case of I'm going to turn up and I'm going to pick this team for every game and this is my team. It's not like the Kevin Keegan days, or it's not like the Roy Hodgson days or whatever, where we turn up with a team and we invite teams to play against us. We've got a tactical plan for each game. And I just wonder whether the tactical game for Sheffield United away would be the same for Crystal Palace at home.
You got to think it's going to be fairly similar. I mean, they're not massively different teams, I guess. I guess Sheffield United are known for playing a slightly strange style, but they're hard to break down. And I think that's what we're going to get with Palace as well. I'm just thinking about that. I mean, I think someone mentioned it in our WhatsApp group, but putting Lookman on the right and then having Brian on the left. I would potentially go for that, just because I don't think we have a good enough option to replace Cavallero on the right.
Yeah, but arguably, Lookman has been one of our best players in the last few games, whether he's come off the bench or whether he started the game. So do you then say, well, he looks all right, we'll play him somewhere else? Or do you say, well, he looks excellent there, we leave him there, and then we find another solution for the other side?
Yeah, but is his style particularly good because of where he's playing, or is he just a very good player? And I think he's not putting.
Have we got time? Have we got time to find that out?
No,
that's the thing.
No.
You know, we've
got a half of football, and I think if he comes in the first half and he's playing on the right and he's cutting in a lot, kind of almost like a good knockout, and you'd hope, and if it's not working out, then you don't sacrifice him. You sacrifice Joe Bryan to play on the left, and then we bring on a Cavallero, Decordova-Reid, or maybe an AK.
You just hope by that point it's not too late, though. There's no real time to experiment anymore, is there? It's shit or bust, really, for Scott.
Well, we can't. The thing is, though, we can't panic now, and much like a plane that loses its engines at 40,000 feet, we do have time to correct things. We're not going to lose, and lose and go down. If we need to have a couple of games where we are still trying out things because we do have these few new players, then so be it. It's really much about patience as anything, and obviously football fans aren't blessed with a huge amount of that. But I do think that Scott does look like he's getting a few of the right elements in there, but there are still certain things that need to be experimented with in order to make sure that we do find our best 11, which I don't think he's found yet.
Well, while Slav was trying to find his best 11, we managed a 4-2 victory over Burnley in our third game of the season, which is far more than we've managed so far this year. Yet we kind of look at this and think we've probably started a bit better. There's more to be excited about this season, let's say. Palace had 5 wins, 5 draws and 9 defeats on their travels last season. Ben, how do you see this one going? What's your score prediction?
I think we're going to get that goal first, like Morgan said we needed, and I think we're going to come up 2-1 winners. We need that first goal, otherwise they're just going to shut up shop, and we probably won't be able to break them down.
I still fancy us to break them down, though. I know Roy's excellent at shutting up shop and being defensive, but we now do have players. We've got Loftus-Cheek, who was on loan at Palace a couple of years ago, and we've got Lookman, who's looked great in the games that we've seen him in so far this year. And I feel like it's not a foregone conclusion anymore that if we do go behind, that we won't get back in the game. I feel like we could get back in the game with those players. And I also feel like Mitrovic is going to have a point to prove this weekend. So I'm going to go for 3-1 Fulham. I'm going to stick my neck out, and I think Mitro will get 2. I think Mitro's definitely going to get 2 goals this weekend. I just feel it in my bones. But as I always say, it always comes with the caveat that I'm very rarely right. Morgs, what about you, mate?
Well, as I've been told for many years, I'm never right. So let's. I'll go with the Palace win. I think I've got. I want to believe this feeling that I have isn't just naive optimism, but I have this feeling we will get our first win this weekend. We need to get it at some point, he says, but I think we'll get it. I think we'll get one in the first half, and I think we'll get one near the end, and I think we'll win 2-0.
That'll do me. Lovely stuff, lads. All right, well, thanks to you both for joining me, and thanks to everybody for listening at home. J-Mac will hopefully be back this weekend if he doesn't have that hangover sprain again. He'll be back on Monday morning with the reaction to the game, and then we will have another show this time next week, which will be the preview of the West Brom game. So enjoy your weekend, guys. Get behind the lads, pay your money, and watch the game on TV. And I will speak to you soon. Cheers.